Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us for our breakout session on building resilience through mindfulness. We're going to get started so we can use the full time for this helpful and informative session. My name is Sarah Lapata, and I am the Support Services Manager with AFTD. This session will be recorded and available on our website after the conference. Participants will be muted for the duration of the presentation, but you can submit questions in the chat as you think of them. Ms. Lunde will be reading the chats that come through as she is presenting, but AFTD staff are behind the scenes to help and share questions and help with resources at the end. And as always, our helpline is available after the conference to discuss individual situations. You will also find many helpful resources in our booklet and on AFTD's website. With that, welcome again. It's my pleasure to introduce Angela Lunde, who will be presenting on building resilience through mindfulness. Ms. Lunde is an associate in neurology and co-investigator in the Mayo Clinic Alzheimer's Disease Research Center. She has spent her career alongside persons living with dementia and caregivers who have mentored her toward an empathetic understanding of the lived experience of dementia and the role of caregiving. Her research interests and focus are in the emotional and quality of life factors experienced by those living with dementia and their caregivers, with a special focus on understanding the outcomes that matter most to them. Her full bio can be found in the program. It is my pleasure to welcome Angela. We'll take it from here.
Great. Well, thank you, Sarah, and thanks to the AFTD for inviting me and giving me an opportunity to share time with you this afternoon. Um, so this is what I want to spend some time talking about, recognizing that mindfulness has been shown to improve our well-being. But sometimes I think mindfulness can be a little bit mysterious and sort of an elusive word. And so I want to help us grasp what this really means with a bit more clarity, but more specifically talk about the relationship that mindfulness can have with you as care partners, and why you may want to consider, if you haven't already, devoting some time to thinking about including mindfulness as a part of your life experience. So to begin with, I'm going to have us just step back and imagine for a moment. And if you want to close your eyes, you certainly can. But imagine this. Imagine that that you are in a marathon, and this is a marathon that you didn't sign up for. And yet you are told that you have to run this marathon and you have to run this race until the end. And yet you have no idea how long the race will actually be or what obstacles you will encounter along the way. You don't know how many steep hills or storms you will face, and you don't even know who's going to be along the route to help you when you need it. You're not sure if you have the physical and emotional stamina to run the race. And to add to the challenge, you are to carry a heavy load on your shoulders, and there's a chance that the load is going to get heavier and heavier as the race goes on. This may be what the caregiving experience can feel like to some of you. So what is needed, I believe, is a way for caregivers to find the inner strength, a way for them to, for those of you, to pace yourself over the long run so that your own well-being is not broken. Incorporating a practice of mindfulness can be an integral strategy to finding that place of inner strength and resilience. So we're going to start out by engaging in a mindful moment. So I invite you to get relaxed on your chair and find a comfortable position. Maybe sit back a little bit so your back is supported by the back of the chair. Try to keep your back upright, but not too stiff or tight. And then let your hands rest wherever they're comfortable. If you'd like, close your eyes. And I invite you to take 3 or 4 deep breaths in through the nose and out through the nose or mouth. feeling the air as it enters your nostrils, fills your chest and abdomen, and flows out again. And now just breathe naturally. Just sensing, though, the flow of breath in and out. You don't need to do anything to your breath. All you are doing right now is just noticing where you feel your breath in your body. You might notice you feel breath in your abdomen, or maybe it's your chest or your throat or your nostrils. And noticing when one breath ends, the next breath cycle begins. All you're doing right now is breathing and noticing your body as it breathes you. One breath in and one breath out. And now, as you do this, you might also notice that your mind begins to wander. You may start thinking about other things. You might notice that you have a bit of impatience. And no matter what you feel or no matter what you think, it's not a problem. This is very natural. Just notice where the mind wanted to go and then guide the attention back again to your breathing. And you're not changing your breathing. You're not forcing your breathing. There's not a way to do it right. All you're doing is noticing the awareness as you breathe in, the awareness as you breathe out, recognizing that you are nurturing yourself with each breath. And I invite you now to take another deep breath in through the nose and full exhale back out through the nose or mouth. And you've just experienced a breath awareness practice. The breath is our life force. As we inhale, we bring oxygen into our cells. As we exhale, we release waste products in the form of carbon dioxide. And this rhythmic breathing, following our breath in and out that we just engaged in, balances the nervous system. So this is a brief example of a mindfulness practice, and it's a tool you can use to bring yourself back to the present moment in stressful situations. And as you know, caregiving presents to us an abundance of stressful situations. Rosalie, a caregiver who I've known for a long time, wrote this in her journal and shared it with me. She says, I struggle to adjust and adapt to so many changes. I feel so angry, frustrated. Everything is such an endeavor. I keep reminding myself to go slow, to stay calm and to take it easy. I am not doing so great in this role. I want to run away. Caring for a person with frontal temporal dementia is profoundly challenging. It's emotional, it's physically challenging. And there are a variety of reasons for this. The disease itself, studies have shown that due to the unique symptoms of FTD and the often early onset, FTD care partners can experience greater burden than caregivers of other types of dementia. We know that changes occur in these long relationships between spouses and other family members, that caregivers have to take on new and unexpected roles in addition to the everyday demands that they've always had, that there can be changes in family dynamics as individuals within family systems accept and cope with this change in different ways. And then as caregivers, we sometimes take on the expectations of others, and we place expectations on ourselves. And with all of this, there can be profound grief and loss and resentment and guilt. Caregiving is stressful. Some of these struggles perhaps resonate with you. And when you think about this stress, oops. When you think about this stress, excuse me, I think I just went the wrong way. There we go. When we think about this stress, you can even ask yourself, well, how does stress show up for me? And for many of you, you may be thinking that it shows up in the form of anxiety or excess worry or racing thoughts. For some of you, it's anger or agitation. Some people engage in overeating or undereating. Sometimes we isolate ourselves and avoid friends or have lower self-esteem. Or you may notice stress in your body in the form of headaches or muscle tension, stomach upset, insomnia, fatigue. And with this, what happens in our bodies is something referred to as a stress response. And this stress response is activated in a couple of different ways. But one thing that I want to mention is that excess stress is not good for us, right? We know it has the power to severely impact our physical, mental, and emotional well-being. And when we are stressed, our ability to communicate effectively, to empathize, and to provide support takes a toll. When we have excess stress, it can lead to tension and conflict and misunderstanding, and ultimately it can strain the bonds that we have with our closest friends and family. So our body has something called a stress response, and it's a fascinating and complex process. And I want to focus on the part of the stress response called our autonomic nervous system. And there are two parts to this autonomic nervous system, the sympathetic branch and the parasympathetic branch. So what you see here on this slide is an overview of the sympathetic branch of the autonomic nervous system. This is the fight or flight response. And it's a very primitive response. And this response is hardwired in our brains. It was originally designed to make sure that we are alert and attentive during times of danger, to keep us protected. So for example, back in the day when a lion came into view while we were perhaps gathering nuts and berries, this response would kick in to give us a surge of energy so we could get out of danger quickly. So it was very helpful back then when these life-threatening situations were everyday occurrences. However, today, the very same fight or flight response is activated anytime we experience a perceived threat or stress. So when the sympathetic system is activated, we are pushed into this fight or flight mode, and it releases stress hormones, including adrenaline and cortisol. And it causes several things to happen. Our heart rate increases, as does our blood pressure, as does our respiration, our muscles contract. We have weakened immunity. And we're less effective and efficient in our minds and bodies. So the other piece of this autonomic nervous system is our parasympathetic branch. And this is our rest and digest. So this system is responsible for allowing the body to relax. It basically undoes the work of the sympathetic division of a stressful situation. So when the parasympathetic is activated, our heart rate and breathing rates slow, our muscles relax, our blood pressure lowers, and digestion is promoted. Our body enters a state of relaxation and recovery. And the more time we're able to spend in the parasympathetic state, the healthier we are. But let me give you a moment to think about this for a moment. How often do you think you experience sympathetic? Now, let me remind you again that sympathetic branch is is the overactive part of our autonomic nervous system, where we release stress hormones, where our heart rate and blood pressure go up. So think about this for yourself. How often do you think you might experience this fight or flight overdrive? Now, remember, as you're thinking about your stress, to consider the extra demands of caregiving, decisions that you have to make relationship changes or conflicts, maybe financial worries, doctor appointments, uncertainty about your future, and all the other stress-inducing events that happen in our everyday modern life, both big and small. So the answer here is that it is estimated that we plunge into this fight or flight overdrive an average of 8 to 15 times every single day. And I think for FTD caregivers, I'm guessing that your number may be on the higher side, meaning that our stress hormones are being released into our bloodstream once every couple of hours. Once every couple hours. So when we are chronically stressed, and most often we're not even aware of it, and if we are aware of it, we may be unable to effectively cope with it. So this means our stress response is on overdrive. It goes unchecked, and we spend a lot of our lives in sympathetic overdrive, damaging our physical and emotional well-being. But here's the real problem. This fight or flight overdrive is activated anytime we perceive a stress, or we are just thinking about something stressful. So when we are thinking about something that may not even happen, this sympathetic overdrive can be ignited. And when something stressful does actually happen, our thoughts can cause even a larger dose of stress to occur. So our thoughts may be real, but they are not always true. So how can we work with this situation? What we can do is that what we can't do is we can't make the world of caregiving stress-free, but we can develop a different relationship to it. I like what John Kabat-Zinn has to say. He says, we can't stop the waves, but we can learn to surf. So with mindfulness, we can increase our ability to manage stressors and bounce back more quickly when we encounter difficulties. We can spend more time in the parasympathetic nervous system, and we can build our resilience. So let me just kind of summarize a little bit where we've gotten up to this point. We've talked about the benefits of mindfulness, that mindfulness helps to dial down the body's stress response. Our heart rate slows down, our blood pressure can normalize, our breathing slows and quiets. Our immunity strengthens because our body is given a chance to rejuvenate. We can have better physical health, including better sleep, and our mood and improved caregiver well-being can occur. Caregivers that I and others have worked with have shared that with a mindfulness practice, they've been able to experience an improvement in their own self-view. They've had reductions in excess stress, reductions in depression, anxiety, and less feelings of helplessness. Specifically, I think the benefits of mindfulness for FTD caregivers, we're going to continue to talk about as I speak more about defining what mindfulness is, that it is promoting self-awareness. Mindfulness is self-awareness, and it's self-awareness that builds resilience in the context of care partnering. And it helps us to work wisely with things that are just going to be inevitable. It helps us to work wisely around those things that we can't control, situations that are unpleasant and painful. And in general, mindfulness can unlock a new way It can't change or get rid of our challenges necessarily, but it unlocks a new way of relating to them. And this way supports well-being for both the care partner as well as the person with FTD. So let me go a little bit now more into, well, what exactly is mindfulness? I would start out by saying that mindfulness is a skill. It's something that with practice we can all learn. And it's a skill that involves training yourself to pay attention to the present moment. So mindfulness is being fully aware of your present moment, and you're doing this on purpose and in a way where you are accepting whatever is presenting itself to you and doing it in a way of self-compassion. So we're going to break this down a little bit more, and I'm hoping make it really practical. But here's another way I like to think about what mindfulness is. So you may be familiar with a snow globe, right? So we know what happens when we shake the globe. And when we shake the globe, the sand and the water, they get all stirred up and it makes the water cloudy. So think of our mind as like sand and water. Our heads are oftentimes swirling with all kinds of runaway thoughts and emotions, many of which we're not even aware of. But when we step back and leave the globe alone, when the globe is left undisturbed, what happens? The sand settles and the water becomes more clear. So mindfulness creates an awareness, and that awareness of our present moment experience settles the sand. Let me say that again. Awareness of our present moment experience settles the sand. So with mindfulness, we're not talking about trying to control our thoughts or empty our mind or quiet our mind. Mindfulness is just being aware of your thoughts as they arise, because any moment that you are aware of your thoughts or how you are feeling, the sand settles, the mind calms, and you cope better. I think this quote really sums up what I've just said very well. Stress diminishes as you take in more of your present moment experience. That's the transformative part. So let me get even into more detail. So when I say mindfulness is taking in your present moment experience, what exactly am I talking about? What does that mean? I think for me, there's really four different ways I think about engaging with the present moment. So taking in the present moment means being aware of my thoughts and patterns of thinking. It means being aware of the present sensations that I'm carrying in my body. It means being aware of what's happening in my environment and in my surroundings in that very moment. And it means tuning in to my emotions and feelings. And I want to talk and doing that in a way that's self-compassionate. So I want to talk more about this idea of being aware of thoughts and patterns. So let's take for a moment and think about the thoughts that we have at any given moment. So here's the thing. Most of us spend nearly 50% of our waking hours engaged in what psychologists refer to as mind wandering or daydreaming, or our brain on autopilot. Our mind wanders a lot of the time, and often we're not even aware of it. I mean, think about this for yourself. How often have you maybe gone out and taken the dog for a walk, or maybe you've driven somewhere, only to realize when you got there that you actually don't even remember the walk. You don't even remember what you saw. Why? Because your mind was somewhere else. So here's the problem with that. When your mind wanders, what are you thinking about? Most often, when our mind wanders, we are checking in with the past, which is often ruminating over some negative event that occurred. And if our mind is not wandering into the past, it's usually caught up in future thinking. And future thinking is generally about uncertainty, fear, worry. We might be thinking about, well, what if I get sick? What if our friends stop visiting? What if, all these sort of potential situations that might happen. So what does this mean? This means that when our mind is on autopilot, when it's just left to wander, there is a high likelihood that you are engaged in thinking about things that are not actually occurring, engaged in thinking about things you have no control over, and about things that may not even happen. So listen to this as well. Our stress response, that sympathetic response that has all those negative things I spoke about happen, that response system cannot distinguish between what's an actual stressor in the moment and what's our mind thinking about a stressful event or a worry or a what if. So mindfulness counteracts all of that. Mindfulness is being fully present and noticing and observing the contents of your thoughts. Essentially, mindfulness is to think about what you're thinking about. It is knowing what's happening in your head with your thoughts at any given moment. You are more of an observer of your thoughts with mindfulness. It's sort of like watching your thoughts on a movie screen. This allows us to take a step back and get some perspective. We put some space between us and our thoughts, and it breaks the cycle of rumination. So back to this diagram again. We've talked a little bit about our thoughts and how our automatic thoughts are often on the negative. Let me also speak for a moment on certain patterns of thinking. So mindfulness provides also an opportunity for us to begin to recognize that many of us have what I refer to as unhelpful mind states or unhelpful thoughts. And these mind states or these unhelpful thoughts generate excess suffering. So the key is to identify our own helpful mind states and become aware of some of them. Because once we identify our own patterns of unhelpful thoughts, we can do something about it. So let me share with you some common unhelpful mind states. One is what is referred to as craving or wanting what we cannot control or what we cannot have. So in the context sometimes of FTD caregiving, sometimes we may crave the loss of intimacy or intellectual conversation, normalcy, the loss of time for yourself. When we are in the midst of dementia care, our experience of wanting things that we cannot have can sometimes overwhelm us. And sometimes it can be so profound that the mind becomes habituated in this chronic state of grief. We lose sight of what can still be enjoyed. Let me give you an example. I had a gentleman named Steve who was in a caregiving support group, or actually was in one of the mindfulness courses that I was leading. And when we talked about this, Steve recognized that he was often in this thought pattern of so much wanting back the relationship he used to have with his wife. And he began to realize that because he was in this chronic state of grief and loss, he could not experience the joy with his wife when she was experiencing joy. Another unhelpful mind state is a very common one of anxiety and worry. And in dementia, it's only natural to worry. Um, but sometimes we create our own anxiousness and worry. There was an FTD caregiver who kind of coined it like this. She said, oftentimes she finds herself, quote unquote, borrowing trouble. In other words, it's easy for the mind to get ahead of itself and anticipate challenges that have not yet happened or may not, or to find ourselves thinking or assuming the worst. So through mindfulness, we learn to pay attention, and we have a tool. Mindfulness provides us with a tool to stop and to put a halt on this runaway train of worry and anxious thoughts. But I also want to point something out, because I know that there's a lot of challenges. I know that there's a lot of suffering. And the point that I'm trying to make is I don't want to minimize or sugarcoat the losses and the worry that I know many of you feel. And actually, on the contrary, mindfulness teaches us to become more aware of our grief and worry. And by doing so, by actually having and tuning into our own grief and worry, we actually begin to tame the harmful effects they have on us. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about that in a moment. But one other common unhelpful mind state that I do want to talk about is something that I think a lot of us do, and it's called negative self-talk. So, self talk is the way that we talk to ourselves, the conversations we have with ourselves in our head. And what we say to ourselves can either be positive or negative, but more often it's negative. And it includes things like self doubt, self criticism, regrets, guilt, and shoulds. You know, a should statement is when you feel like you should think, feel, or behave in a certain way. You know, maybe you think you should be able to care for your spouse without getting any help or without ever getting angry. So it's important to notice when you're engaged in negative self-talk, and most of us do it a lot. With mindfulness, we notice. And when we notice ourselves in this pattern of negative self-talk, we're able to tame it and not get so caught up or carried away by it. We learn when we notice to change the pattern. So paying attention to our present moment is also related to our feelings. With mindfulness, we begin to make the choice to embrace rather than suppress the tough emotions. With mindfulness, we deliberately choose to slow down and to take in all of the feelings, to take in all of the experiences that come up, and even welcome the harder emotions. You know, it's normal to hate the caregiving, but to love the person you're caring for. There's nothing bad or wrong about any of the feelings that you're feeling. And in fact, by ignoring them, by ignoring guilt or any other emotion, the result can be increased distress and a reduction in well-being. So that's a lot of background, and I'm hoping I wanted to say one other thing. When it comes to noticing our thoughts, I think John Kabat-Zinn says it very well. He says, in order to change negative feelings, we first must notice them. To be in relationship with what you're going through, to hold it, and in some sense to befriend it, is where healing lies. So, to summarize what I've said so far, mindfulness is becoming aware of where your mind goes, noticing your thoughts, your own patterns of thinking, and then it's choosing to focus your attention on the present moment and observe what you are experiencing. This includes paying attention to your feelings, your surroundings, the sensations in your body. It's choosing to be with your present moment experiences in an accepting way, in a non-judgmental way, and in a self-compassionate way. It is a skill that can be learned and developed, and ultimately it opens doors of healing and wellness. and changes the heart's capacity to accept things as they are. So I'm hoping up to this point, I've sort of set the stage to at least have you think about mindfulness in a way where perhaps you're curious. And I want to just share some resources that are available. There is something called the Presence Care Project, and you can find information about them on presencecareproject.com. I am part of the Presence Care faculty, myself and a number of other mindfulness facilitators. And we teach a 20-hour program called Mindfulness-based dementia caring. I have a course coming up in about 2 weeks. You can see over to the right side of the screen what some of the themes are that we discuss. There's also apps out there that you may or may not be familiar with. I've listed a few of them on this slide. There are a variety of websites. I can make sure that, because I know you won't be able to copy these all down right now, but I can make sure you have access to them later on if you are interested. And there are a variety of books. There's a lot of books out there on mindfulness, but this is probably my top 10 list, if you will, especially as it relates to dementia and the caregiving experience. So in the last 10 minutes or so that I have, I want to sort of say, well, okay, Angela, you've shared a lot of information. Maybe I've convinced you to some degree that you maybe should consider cultivating a mindfulness practice in your life. But I want to leave you with some thoughts like, well, where do I start? What do I do just to get myself started in the practice of mindfulness? Well, I'm going to go back to something I think you've already heard me say, and that is to pay attention to your thoughts. A significant barrier to our well-being is all this chatter that the mind generates, especially when we are faced with challenging and stressful situations. Becoming aware of your own thoughts and your own unhelpful patterns of thinking is essential. Truly mindful individuals become observers of their thoughts. They pay attention to their thoughts, and they understand that, well, thoughts are just thoughts. And while they are real, they're not necessarily true, and we are not at the mercy of our thoughts. Number two is to feel what you feel. There's a saying out there that says, what we resist persists. And I think that often relates to our feelings. Sometimes many of us, as perhaps a way we think we need to cope, we try to suppress our feelings. When we do that, we often find that these difficult feelings continue to linger and gain strength and power and persist. Yet when we give some attention to our difficult emotions, when we feel them, they become less intense and they don't have the capacity to overwhelm us as much. There's a technique out there by a gentleman named Dr. Daniel Siegel. He's a psychiatrist, and it's called Name It. And so here's how it goes. We've all had experiences of having some very strong emotions where we feel totally out of control. Something happens or somebody says something, our heart rate goes up, we can't think clearly, and we react impulsively. A simple practice is called name it to tame it. And this technique involves noticing and labeling your emotions as you're having them. So identifying an intense emotion has the effect of reducing the hold it has on you, reducing the intensity. And even better if we can do it with kindness and a little compassion to ourselves. So this is what it sounds like when you're having a difficult emotion. It might sound like this: I feel overwhelmed and angry right now. May I be kind to myself in this moment. Name it to tame it. Similarly, there's a practice by John Kabat-Zinn called the stop practice. Stop, take a breath, observe, and proceed. This is an informal everyday practice. It's essentially an opportunity to check in with yourself throughout the day to make sure you're not caught up in these runaway thoughts that are taking you down these dark holes and these dark places of negativity. So with stop, you take a step back from everyday stressors and you remind yourself to come back to the present moment. So the way that this one works is I invite you to kind of identify some things that that you do every day. Like if you drive a lot, maybe when you're in the car, you probably have to stop at a traffic light. Most of us probably wash our hands several times a day, or perhaps every time you sit down to a meal. Pick something and let it be your cue or your reminder to stop, take a breath, and pause for a moment. So this can be as simple as taking a couple of breaths every time you wash your hands. Kind of observe and name your thoughts. Look around, just take in the moment, feel the water on your hands, feel the temperature. Um, and then what that's done is it's taken you out of your head and it brings you back into the present moment. And you can use the stop practice when stakes are higher, like when something has triggered you, you can feel your heart rate going up, your muscles start to tense. You can stop, take a breath or two, observe. So this is the thing to remember. The moment you take in your present moment, the moment you notice your thoughts, the moment you pay attention to the water on your hands when you're washing them is a magical pause, because you're getting out of your head and you're changing the course of that stress response. So here's the thing. When something starts to set off your stress response and you choose to bring your attention to the present moment, something even as simple as observing your breath for a couple of cycles, you create a pause. So instead of a knee-jerk reaction, that pause, that space that you have created by bringing your attention to the present moment allows you to proceed with a thoughtful, more calm response, tapping into your parasympathetic autonomic nervous system rather than your sympathetic nervous system. In other words, the trigger has not gone away, the stimulus has not gone away, but how you cope with that stressor has shifted in a way that protects your own well-being. So in the last couple of minutes, I want to close with some self-compassion, and this is inspired by a woman named Kristen Neff, and she was actually one of the books that's on that list that I recommended earlier. So as we go into these final couple of minutes, I'm going to invite you again to make sure that you're seated in a comfortable way on your chair, and take a couple deeper breaths in through the nose and then back out again through the nose or the mouth. And then I invite you to take one hand and place it on your heart, and then take the other hand and place it over the hand that's on your heart, and give yourself a little bit of pressure there in that heart space, almost feeling like you're giving yourself a heart hug. Notice your breath, noticing the beating of your heart. This is bringing you back to the present moment, because your breath and your beating heart are always in the present moment. And now I invite you to repeat these words silently to yourself. May I feel the support and healing of this shared community today. May I feel the support and healing of this shared community today. May I be kind to myself. May I give myself the compassion I need. May I find ease. And final words inspired by a meditator and writer and inspiring gentleman named Yung Pueblo. He says something like this: remember, every pain is temporary. Honor your boundaries. Let go of perfection. Feel your emotions without letting them control you. And remember, joy is available when you spend time appreciating the present moment. And with that, if you want to take one more deep cleansing breath in and a full, complete exhale out, you can relax your hands down by your side. Blink open your eyes. Thank you for your time, your presence, your attention, and I wish you well.
Thank you, Angela, for this important discussion and all of the information you shared. It's so important for care partners to have this mindfulness practice to improve health and well-being in order to be able to care for their loved ones. In a moment, we will automatically leave this breakout session. The second round of breakouts begins at 2 p.m. Again, if you have any questions, our helpline is available. And I do believe, Angela, did you want to share your contact information?
I do. Thank you for reminding me, Sarah. I am very happy to just address comments, questions that you may have. If you're interested in learning more about some of the mindfulness opportunities that we have going on, please feel free to contact me. My contact information is my last name, Lunde, Lunde, dot my first name, Angela, Angela, at Mayo, Mayo.edu. I'll say that one more time. Lunde, Lunde, dot Angela, Angela, at Mayo, Mayo.edu.
Thank you. And yes, I did just see a comment, and very good point. Not to engaging in a mindfulness practice is not necessarily in order to care for a person, but because you deserve it. Very
Oh,
good point.
so
Thank you
well
so much.
said. Lovely words to end with.
Yes, thank you everyone for joining us today, and take care of yourselves. And the next round of breakouts will begin at 2 p.m.